Okay, so welcome to the first meeting of Universal School of Self in Cyberspace. I'd like to give you a small synopsis of how I came to this moment and what it means to me. And of course, it will take on its own meaning for you. The classes will be designed so that if anyone attends singularly, they'll be able to get something out of that particular class. And if people wanted to take it ongoingly, it would have a momentum that would build on itself. So you're welcome to either one. My plan is to meet once a month. And I feel that that is best way. In today's world, it's often very difficult to take time out of our schedules. But as long as we can touch base with these concepts, which for me have totally changed and transformed my life, mostly meaning my inner life. Of course, we all start our journey to some degree wanting and thinking that we can change the world. And many times it seems as far as we come, we seem like we're right in the same place. But what's beautiful about it is how you change and grow through the efforts that you put into your life journey. And I will say that when you change, the world changes because you're a part of the world. And I would say that part of what we're doing is not to be people who are reacting to the shadows on the walls of the cave, but are turning towards our inner light and being guided by this. Without boring you, I had a rough upbringing. My parents were both drug addicts, so not really present. And I was put in foster care, which would have been great, except for my foster parents were abusive to me. I eventually went into a live-in drug rehabilitation facility, not because of me, but because of my mother, who had endeavored to become clean and had entered this facility, and then it was part of an experiment, and children lived there, not with their parents. Anyways, the whole thing became a cult. So I spent 4 years in the midst of a cult, and I eventually left and had my idealism intact. I still haven't lost it. And was interested in the thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and to some degree the Kennedy brothers, a little bit more on the Robert Kennedy side. But when they were all shot down and assassinated, my young mind came to the conclusion that when you try peacefully, they don't listen to you. So I became, I think today they call it radicalized, but revolutionary in a sense. And I won't bore you with all the details of that, except that it culminated in me attending a riot in San Francisco over the assassination of George Moscone and Harvey Milk. And in particular, the riot was on the day that Dan White, the one who assassinated them, got 7 years based on a Twinkie defense, which is he ate Twinkies and therefore he couldn't control himself. I don't mean to laugh, but it was an injustice. And I was leading the charge of that riot and ended up getting arrested and beaten by undercover police officers and put in jail. And there, as I sat in my jail cell, I've realized a few things. One is that jail is no place for a human being to be, and that I didn't want to be there. And also that I sat in my meditation and had a vision into all the world's revolutions and realized that most often people become what they oppose. So you develop a hatred for your oppressors, you kill them, you take over, and then you become just like them. And it was a long series of images, but right when I came to the end of that story, I heard this small voice say, this time it will be a revolution in consciousness. Why didn't I think of that? Anyways, it made sense to me. And right then and there, I dropped all plans for any violent change, violent overthrow of anything, which I'm so thankful for, and returned to my nonviolent spirit and went in search of this revolution in consciousness. Not long after that, again, a long story, but I ended up being drawn to the Shaolin Temple Institute / Universal School of Self in San Francisco. And when I walked down the stairs, or sat on the top of the stairs and looked beyond the patches that they wore, a little inner voice said, "This is it." And so I walked further down the stairs and met Sitai Gong, the leader of the school. And I remember 4 things that he said, although he said a lot. If you think that I talk a lot, I tend to probably follow in his footsteps a little bit on that regard, but I've definitely edited down. So I call myself Sitai Gong Light. So the speeches are actually short, people. But this is what I remember. One of the first things he said, the secret's right under your nose. Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven is within you. To that, I will agree experientially. Like I might have agreed to it on that night, but known nothing about it. But my journey has proven that a kingdom of heaven, you don't have to pack it in those words necessarily, lives within us. I would go on to say all we're seeking is already here. And if people were to understand that as the center of their being and show up in the world and have their thought, words, and actions be guided by this deeper place, what we would be seeing in our world would certainly be more harmonious, if not heavenly. Now, some people scripturally argue with that because it's supposed to be some kind of blasphemy that we could be a part of this, that it's living within us. So they interpret that scripture to mean the kingdom of heaven is in our midst, or the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Guess what? Even better. It's within us. It's all around us. And it's at hand, meaning it's here now. So I guess we'll spend the next 40 years exploring in these meetings why we don't get that and trying to move the stuff out of the way. But I would say it's within, it's beyond, within, and in and through all. But on that day, all I knew was that was enough to go, okay, I'm willing to look under my nose. He's probably not talking about my mustache. So something's happening here. The next thing was, it's a lifetime course. My inner thought was, okay, let's get started. I don't know what was wrong with me. But I had already had this mystical thing happen in jail, and then this little voice said, this is it. So I'm like, okay, lifetime, let's go. Anyways, I'm not there, and they closed it, so I won't go there again into that particular basement. The lifetime course is this journey we take into what lives within us. And people tend to be a little lazy. True? Okay, I mean, we all have that component in us to some degree, but if you observe people, they're a little lazy, which leads to this idea, I just want to get there. Why do I have to take a journey? Do I have to tend to it every day? Okay, remind me not to hire you as my gardener, because we know that garden is going to die and we're not going to have a harvest. So to me, it's a lifetime course is a great communication, because it lets you know you're on a journey that leads into the third thing he said. So I'm not going to say it yet, but you're on a journey that will last a lifetime. And it's a blessing. It's your good pleasure and honor to tend to it each and every day. I'm going to suggest to you that all you need is a little time in the morning, a few times throughout the day to check in, and a little bit of time before you go to bed. What it means is take time for yourself. The name of our workshop today is Be True to Yourself. But how can you be true to yourself if you don't even know who you are? And so many people say, I don't have time for myself. Make time in the morning, 10 minutes. Just sit with yourself. Just breathe, relax, or whatever way works for you. I am particularly through this course going to make a 3-point exercise that will help. It's based on breath, sound, and energy. Very simple. It will only take about 10 minutes to do. But it's checking in with your own awareness, because from a place of awareness, you're going to be better guided. You're going to navigate the scape of life so much better. That's called wisdom. More creative power will come to you. More love. How many people understand that if you're able to have more love available to you and to love more, that your life is going to be richer? I just like to do those just to see if you'll raise your hand or not, but it's okay. So love, wisdom, creative power is living in you. So this is why it's worth it to take the time. And then throughout the day, it's really simple. Just look out the window, take a breath, see a bird. Take a moment, enjoy your tea or your coffee if you have a coffee truck. And you're just in the moment, and it reminds you to touch back to the simple appreciation of life in those moments. It could be while you're with one of your loved ones and they're annoying you, and you're about to say something, but then all of a sudden you step back and you're just like, one day they may not be here. And this thing that annoys me so much, it's going to be so damn endearing, I'm going to miss it. Just like it was with my dog Max. Always scratching to go out at night. Just when he usually waited till I sat down and was all comfortable. I had one of those king-like chairs. I sat down after a long day of teaching children and worst of all adults in a dojo. And I go, ah, and then all of a sudden I hear Max. Then I get up and open the door. Then a few minutes later, come back in. Then a little bit after, it's like, what am I, a doggy doorman? So annoying. But when Max passed away, the silence was deafening. And I sat in the chair with tears coming down my cheeks, just wanting to hear that little scratch again. So perhaps you're with your loved one, instead of saying the mean thing you were about to say, you just go over and you say, you know what, I love you. You kiss them on the forehead and they keep yelling at you, but you're just kind of smiling, which watch out because they're going to piss them off even more. Anyways, it's a lifetime course. And I have found this tending leads to greater and greater places. That's why I say I'm happier and happier and happier. Not that the outer conditions of my life always go my way or the world is going the way I want it to. No, it's not. But inwardly, I have deeper insight, deeper awareness, and I'm growing into this treasure of the spirit that lives within me and is part and parcel of who I am. We got no goddamn limits. And while pouring tea, hey, empty your cup. Try some of my tea. I would ask that you do the same, which is come here expecting at times to learn and expand more than what you've already gathered to know up to this point. By all respect to that, keep it. Not trying to take anything away and also not trying to mold you into any shape, but just to nurture your own journey. But it's wise to expand. One of the things we say and will say is become nothing, and then you'll really become something. Because once you become nothing, there's more room to grow. It's an act of humility. Martin Luther King said, faith is taking the first step, even though you can't see the whole staircase. And I would say that this gathering is like that. Just to take a step towards that greater mystery, even though you can't see the whole picture of where you'll go if you keep stepping. The other thing I remember is there was a very long staircase that had a rail that went up to the top of the stairs. And Sitai Gong told me to put my finger on the end of, no, put my fingernail on the very end of the rail. And he said, okay, you see how much space there is underneath your fingernail? And I said, yeah. And he said, that's how much humanity knows up to this point. And all the way to the top of the staircase is how much we still have to learn. And then I guess if everything humanity knew was to the top of the staircase, what I knew was probably right in my fingernail at the bottom. And still is. So the point is it puts it in perspective. The other thing I want to say, and I think is important, is that we follow principles, not people. This is not a cult of personality. I just am tickled by the name Gong. I like it. It's a nickname. And it means master instructor, but as I've said before, I take it to mean instructor of masters, meaning that I'm passing the torch back to you. There's a master living in you, and if there's any way that I can facilitate your journey into that mastery, facilitate your journey into greater expression, then it's my great joy and pleasure to do so. But Gong was not a perfect man. He was not a person whose everything that he did matched his teaching. I would say that what he pointed to and what his message was exceeded what he was living. And to me personally, he was the first one to say that, which was, don't put me on a pedestal. Don't make me the cause. I'm still learning about myself. So I want to say the same thing to you. I'm an imperfect man and have been an imperfect man. Now, if you go back into my past and find out things that I did and want to cancel me and start canceling all the movies I've ever been in and everything, you can do that. But only thing I would say is I did what I did before love came to town. Remember U2 and BB King? Since love came to town, I'm doing a lot better, but I'm still not perfect. So don't look to me or to anyone. To me, that was central to this teaching that I learned, is not to worship human beings. Also, not to trust that the truth in another is greater than the truth that lives in you. How sad is that, right? Let's say a person wants to find God. They show up every week and some guy on a pulpit tells you, this is what God is, so you just believe him. But what if they didn't even know themselves? Later, you're going to be really pissed off because you expected them to know more than you could know. True, you should be humble. Many people have a lot to teach you. But I learned that a 6-year-old child has something to teach me. So I'm a student of life and I'm a student of other people, but I never assume that what's living outside of me is not also living inside of me. And if there's a truth that I can't find in myself, what good does it do me? Make sense? How would I even know? How can I listen to the truth of another unless there's someplace inside me that it resonates? Why did I listen to the words of Martin Luther King or Mahatma Gandhi? Sounded like truth, but I must have had something inside of me that knew the sound. So that's the setup. The point is that as I've been out here looking for what I want to do next, at some point I sat down and I went, the secret's right under my nose. Is what I've been living all this time. I came to a place, was directed to a place called the Universal School of Self. I studied these lessons. I learned these lessons. And it is the spiritual and philosophical aspects of Shaolin. But it's a thing. The movements that we learn in Shaolin could be a reflection of it. And in that way, they would rely on these greater principles, but the greater principles don't rely on them. In other words, you could do movements a lot of different ways and not do any movement and still be able to approach this greater principle. a lot of the time I'm going to refer to this greater principle as the universal great one, because then it allows an umbrella big enough for our faith. And at some point in our journey, you may find that a lot of the walls and barriers that we human beings draw are artificial, meaning that they don't exist. And part of your freedom will be able to go beyond limits and find out that oneness is one thing. There's such a thing as unity consciousness. But it has to be experienced in order to be known. And then you realize that all these arguments were silly arguments of children, that we're talking about the same thing.